the lifespan of a console. The current generation that we have in our homes as we speak, that's the 360 obviously, and the PS3. There's obviously the Nintendo Wii and Wii U as well. It's pretty much gone far longer than previous generations of consoles. For the past 2 or 3 years, we've been awaiting announcements either from Microsoft or Sony about the successor to their current consoles. Finally, Sony has given us one, but they're very coy about it. All they showed us really at the launch was just to control the evolution of their controller. They gave us the specs of the console itself, but they still haven't shown it. Now, what does this mean for the hardcore gamer out there, and even just a casual gamer? We got our man Avery to sit down and talk to us about it in Gamer Station.
Hey, Avery Score here with another titillating episode of the Gamer Station. We're going to be discussing the PlayStation 4. I'd be playing it right now if we're at the end of this year. I can barely wait. New possibilities of enjoyment, both for developers and gamers like yourselves. So a few days ago at a big conference, Sony unveiled everything but the physical console itself, what it's going to look like. Incredible that we don't know yet, but we do know quite a bit about the controller, about the launch lineup, and about the technical specifications of the system, which are so choice. It's almost incredible. So, the controller, let's start off with that. It was quite revolutionary. It's called the DualShock 4. That's not very revolutionary, but everything else was. It comes with a tactile pad, which I'm hugely excited about because it offers amazing possibilities to anyone who's being sent a developer kit right now to allow for really granular interaction with the objects in the game. Imagine that you pick up a sword that you just looted off a mob, right? You can actually physically manipulate it. Imagine solving puzzles with a tactile pad integrated directly on your controller. If you're a PlayStation Vita user, you probably don't need to imagine. You can do it right now. So this is very much in line with the company's vision for how games should be on the PlayStation Vita. Speaking of which, there's interaction between the PlayStation Vita and the PlayStation 4. By default, similar to the Wii U, you can sort of pick up the game where you left off on your PlayStation Vita if you own both. So in other words, you're playing a game on your PlayStation 4, oh, this is fun, you know, I've got to go to the toilet, okay, I'll pick up the gameplay on my PlayStation Vita. So that offers huge possibilities. And talking to my friends who are big Wii U fans, that's one feature of the system that they really love, the ability to play the games on their controller. They find that to be probably the standout feature of the system. So I'm quite excited about that. Now let's talk about the system's tech specs in general because they really are mind-boggling. So there's pretty much an AMD x64 architecture chip in there with 8 cores. We don't know the exact clock speed of those yet, so we can't really make any assumptions about the computational possibilities of the CPU that will come with this system, but I can say this, I'm expecting nothing less than revolutionary out of that. The fact that there are 8 cores in there is already quite telling. Once we know the clock speed of each of those individual cores, we'll be able to calculate the operations per second. I'm not particularly worried. I think it's going to be a huge powerhouse. Let's hope, though, that Sony doesn't encounter the manufacturing difficulties that it did with the Emotion Engine at the launch of the PlayStation 3, which both sent system cost through the roof and caused them to have a penury of consoles in the stores, much to the chagrin of anyone wanting to pick one up for the holidays. So moving on, the GPU is pretty much going to be a Radeon 7850 analog. So analysts are saying it's as yet unannounced what the exact chipset will be, but we do know this, it'll do 1.84 teraflops. That's 1.84 trillion operations per second, which is just an enormous amount of calculation. So it will be a very powerful GPU, probably with a decent amount of VRAM, although we don't know the exact specs on that yet. Where we do know the RAM specs is on the system itself. The system itself will come with 8 gigabytes of GDDR5, which is a huge amount, and that was a recent addition. It had been widely speculated that the system would shift with 4 gigabytes of RAM, similar to the Xbox 720, also upcoming. But that bump up to 8 gigabytes I see as hugely necessary. Games these days not only rely heavily on the VRAM of the graphics cards integrated with them, but on the system RAM in order to provide the huge textures, amazing particle effects, and overall big visual impact that they do today. I see that 8 gigabytes as wholly necessary, and the fact that Sony has produced that should be a sigh of relief to gamers all over. I think you're probably thinking to yourself right now that this is a system that has the tech specs of a high-end PC today. Indeed it does. You'd be happy to take home PC, sit it under your desk with specs at all comparable to that. So to wit, what is the cost of this system possibly going to be? Well, people have speculated $600. Sony, however, has gone bidden quite hard in the past for having high system costs. Obviously, globally, console manufacturers sell these systems at a loss and make up that money in the sales of games, particularly first-party titles. But how much can Sony possibly afford to do that when they're offering such luxurious hardware? Well, moving on, the camera is also going to play a big role in Sony. So Microsoft made waves with the Kinect, perhaps less in Asia than in other territories, but believe me, Sony took note. And the PlayStation Move was never a huge success on the PlayStation 3. Indeed, you wave around that little wand, it shines colors, kind of janky. However, there's a camera included with the PlayStation 4, two in fact, that track your movements and are supposedly able quite well to separate the player from his environment. We'll see how that performs in person, perhaps a year later. But the controller has this kind of eerie, iridescent blue glow behind it, which should allow pretty easy tracking of it as the player moves while he's controlling the action on screen. Very similar to the PlayStation Move in that way. The bright color allows the controller to be easily separated and tracked as an object away from the background or anything else that might happen to be moving the player's game-playing environment. So that's quite cool. Let's talk a bit about the launch titles, because that's what really matters, doesn't it? A new platform's always exciting. You kind of take it out of the box, sniff it, blow off any dust that might have settled, and enjoy. But without games, it's really just a block of metal and plastic. So one of the games I'm particularly excited about is Watch Dogs. And Watch Dogs is coming out on PC, PS3, and PS4. So it's really one of those transitional titles that has to support the previous generation of hardware, which might limit its efflorescence a little bit, might limit the technical possibilities of that game. But it does look quite good in the about 9.5-minute trailer that we've seen. In Watch Dogs, you're part of a kind of a secret society bound to take down a corrupt system by all means possible. So there's going to be some fighting in that game, some espionage, and from the trailer, one thing that's interesting is you've got this smartphone, which gives you information on all the non-player characters in the game, as well as allows you to take out cell networks and do a number of super spy tools like that. So that's quite cool. The game looks very nice. It's got this kind of open world, sandboxy feel similar to Grand Theft Auto. And in general, kind of gives me a vibe of 65% Grand Theft Auto and maybe 35% Assassin's Creed, something like that, minus the jumping up and down of buildings. So that's a game to look for. Another one is Knack. Now this isn't a visual powerhouse. It did have this great cinematic feel in the trailer and some awesome cutscenes. What it really had is amazing character design and possibilities for very revolutionary action gameplay. In Knack, you control a robot who's created from a series of blocks and can grow and shrink depending on the task and depending on what he absorbs from his environment, kind of Katamari Damacy style. It seems to have a wacky ethos about it, an aesthetic, something that appeals to me. And although that's not going to drop any jaws, it looked like a very strong launch title. And if those two titles don't satisfy you, there are a host of others coming to the platform. There's a new Killzone out. I don't know if you heard about that. That's kind of big news. Diablo 3 is coming to the system, kind of a weird choice for a new platform that's controlled primarily with a controller, but perhaps the tactile interface will allow for more interaction possibilities with that game. And my personal favorite, The Witcher 3, yet another entry into that wonderfully robust, wonderfully adult series of role-playing games. So check it out. I'm titillated with excitement. I'm practically vibrating. I'm gonna vibrate off my stool right now. See you next time.
Really interesting. Thanks for that very much, Avery. Do you share those sentiments about the PlayStation 4? I want to know, and he wants to know. Just find us on Facebook, find us on Twitter, and you can leave your comments there. You can tweet me directly at Adam Carruthers as well. Plenty more in store for you next week. I shall see you then. My name is Adam Carruthers.